Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. So you could please sit down and behave yourselves. Thank you all for coming. We always start our select board meetings with pledge of allegiance. So if you'd all rise, the flag is over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we're going to start the evening with public hearings and some presentations. They'll be run by different committees. Those committees will accept questions. The select board is an overseer, but the committee chair or whoever's doing the presenting will be in charge of fielding questions. If you have a question, would you please go to the microphone and state your name and your address? Just the first time, you don't have to repeat it. I'm also going to just suggest, there are a lot of people here, which is really great, and a lot of people have opinions, which is also really great. If your opinion coincides with someone else's opinion, you might just say hallelujah or amen, rather than repeat what has been said. I'm not trying to censor anything, I'm just trying to make this expedient as possible. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about protocol or how we're going to proceed? Perfect. So the first part of the public hearing is the Conservation Commission presentations. So you're up. You can have mine. Right there. Oh, this one works.
These are on. Dick Hogue, 167 Loring Lane.
Yeah, just leave it on.
Bob Humphrey, 727 Poland Range Road.
So we're here to talk about a project that I'm on the Conservation Commission. And this is a project we were working on for at least 3 years. And last year and this year, we put quite a bit of time into it. What we're trying to do is get an easement on 2 of our wood lots so that they can't be built on in the future. The land will still belong to the town of Pownell, and a lot of the decisions that made with it will be the Pownell people will be telling us what they want to do and don't want to do. If you've picked up this particular pamphlet of papers, it'll explain everything. Generally, if I'm going to do something, I go with questions better. It's better to get a lot of information out if people have questions. Questions yet? Okay. We're proposing the Elmwood Road and the Sweetser Road wood lots. That's about 180 acres combined with the 2 of them. The easement that will be put on them, again, like I said, I believe already, that there'll be no building allowed on. But everything else will be just like we go right now. Royal River Conservation, they're going to be the people that hold the easement. But again, everything else is going to be done through the town through normal votes. I don't want to just read this right off to you completely. The forest plans for both Sweetser Road and Elmwood Road are going to stay the same. The forestry plans will be cutting those just like we have in the past. Nothing's going to change there. Hunting, fishing, is going to be just like it has been, and that's one of the things that will happen if we want to change that. If we want to do something different with that in the future, that's up to the town. The trails that are there now, we're just gonna try to maintain them, keep them clean and neat. Royal River will help with that as well. They have a bigger trail crew than we do. Can't think of a lot else. There's no, not very controversial, I guess. There's no questions at all.
I would like to offer a few, these are more or less personal editorial comments, but again, I'm Bob Humphrey. I've lived in Pownell for 34 years. I was on the original Pownell Land Trust many years ago. I am now on the board of directors of the Royal River Conservation Trust. I'm on the board of directors of the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine. Again, I've lived here 34 years. I chose Pownell. I chose my neighborhood largely because of the open space. Over the time I've been here in town, I've seen open space and opportunities for outdoor recreation significantly diminished, particularly in recent years. And I'm glad to see this proposal is coming forward because it's a step in the right direction to stem the tide of development. I have no issues with responsible development, but we own this property as people, citizens of the town of Pownell, and we can preserve it in perpetuity so that our children and our grandchildren can continue to go out into the woods and hunt and fish and hike and snowmobile and cross-country ski and ride mountain bikes or ride horseback ride, whatever. There's no loss. I don't see a loss to the town. We're not taking land off the tax rolls because it's town-owned property. We're not giving up income because as long as there is a certified forest management plan, the town can continue to do what they've done since I've been here, which is sustainable forest management. It's a plus plus. Again, I don't see the cons, but maybe you do. So let's hear from everybody else.
My name is Bo Chesney. I'm on the Lawrence Road. Just in the overall concept, are there definitions contemplated or restrictions as to the type of activity that may occur on trails in the future? One of the things we've experienced, I think, or some of us have certainly experienced, is maybe some more restrictive elements on trail use that have occurred over the past, say, 20 years, as some of the land has been, some of the trails have been starting to manage by a different entity or something. Some other restrictions have been placed on them. And so my question is, from the town of Pownell standpoint, are there any controls or ability for the town to manage what types of trails would be, what types of activities would be on those trails? And I'm thinking, even 20, 30, 100 years from now, recreational change. There'll be hovercrafts. I don't know, but from a practical standpoint, we're talking about in perpetuity. So I'm just kind of curious as to what the Conservation Commission may contemplate on that.
So the way we're looking at it right now, we're not going to change anything at all. The trails are going to stay what they are, if there are any. Otherwise, they're going to stay just as they are. If we want to change it in some fashion or another, we'll go to town meeting and figure out what it is exactly we want to do and vote on it. It would be the way that I see it happening. And that's pretty much the way it's written right now. Again, Royal River will be helping Conservation Commission here, just because we don't have the people who work a lot with trails. And the trails are minimal on both of those lots now. They're pretty rough trails. Question.
And I would add that, as sort of a general policy of the Royal River Conservation Trust, we promote all sorts of outdoor activities, specifically things like hunting. As long as it's, safe, responsible, and practical, we try to encourage people to use all of our properties, whether it's fee owned or a conservation easement. And also I would like to add that, there's going to be some financial obligation with regard to stewardship of these properties, and the Conservation Trust will be primarily responsible for that. So it's not that financial burden will not fall on the town.
Go ahead. Oh,
Sorry, Michelle Harrison, property on Elmwood Road. Can you just clarify for me? I'm a little confused. Is this proposed land the same land that's also on a real estate request on the select board meeting?
yes, one piece is.
One piece is. Is it just, okay. So that the chart that I'm looking at up there, is that part of what you guys are proposing right now?
This is the Elmwood Road.
Okay. Okay.
Somebody else has it.
I'm Matt Nielsen. I'm the road commissioner for the town of Pownell. And just looking through this, one quick question I had with part C, the parking on the backside. This says that it would basically stop any dumping up there, which the town public works does use to dump access fill over the bank in the parking area that they're talking. Just moving forward, I was just wondering, would this be a stop to that, or how would that work?
Right now, the way that it's written, we're gonna keep that to a minimum if possible. If you need to expand for parking or if we're logging, we may want to expand that area. So, and that's gonna be left up basically to you.
Okay, that's fine. I just was reading it and I just wanted to double check. But thank you.
And if you need a place to dump fill, you know where I live.
Susan Peters, Allen Road. I'm not that familiar with the Royal River Trust, so my question is, if we're not doing any real changes to it, why do we even need to be involved with Royal River? And my second portion to that is, if Royal River is involved, what legal, what is our commitment from the town? What is the town giving up so that we have to have them?
I'll take the first part and maybe defer the second. Restate the first question, just briefly.
Why do we have to be involved with Royal River if we're not making any changes to the town? What's benefit?
Okay, from my perspective, the town has always been very consistent about what it has done with its property up to this point. But at any point that could change. It's somewhere further down the road, a different select board or a consortium of citizens could come forward and say, why are we holding this land? Why don't we sell it and develop it? This ensures that that land is going to be held forever in a conservation easement, so it will never be developed. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. As far as the legal ramifications, I would have to read through the fine print, and which is in pencil, and there's much to be resolved between the trust and the select board on that. But in my first glance view, I don't see any issues.
The same thing happened though with the Royal River Trust. They changed their vision and went to something different.
I'm not sure I understand, but once there's an easement, that's a legal document. And the terms and conditions are held by the court. We can't all of a sudden change our mind and say, no, we want to sell it, or we want to develop it, or we want to do something different with it. Those terms are static. It's a conservation easement. It cannot be developed. And it will be maintained for public use, for all types of recreation that are safe, responsible, and practical.
Andy O'Brien, Upper Minot Road. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the town would have the option, if the town so voted, to put a conservation easement on this property deeded if they wanted to, without any Royal River.
That would be my understanding, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
Fred Falber from Lawrence Road. Clarify that. Sure. That, the town could put an easement, a conservation easement on the property. On the other hand, there has to be an entity to hold that easement. And the Royal River Conservation Trust, I guess, is the local entity that has, it would fulfill that function.
I have a conservation easement on my own property.
I think just to clarify, I'm in favor of the approach here. And I think the point of Royal River or a third party holding the easement is they have a process where at least annually they're reviewing all of their easements and looking at each one of the properties to see if there's any violation. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's any violation of the terms of the easement, and they will take action to enforce the easements. That is their obligation by holding that easement. So they are basically recognized by the courts, by the IRS, to fulfill that role. And that's why, Andy, your property and my property, or some of the property, is actually subject to an easement that the Royal River Conservation Trust monitors. And I get a notice annually that they're looking over my shoulder. So, thanks.
I'm Marcia Bowen from Royal Road. We're still in the question part, correct?
Yes.
So just to clarify, it's just the Sweetster lot that is under the request for a real estate purchase, or are they both?
I don't believe the suites, it's the Elmwood Road.
It's the Elmwood, so this lot right here that we're seeing. Okay, and my second question is that there's probably some real advantage for Royal River taking an interest in these particular properties because they don't just preserve property because it's there. So maybe you could illuminate us on why these properties might be so important to Royal River.
I'll do the best I can without visual aids. We've done a lot of planning, strategic planning at the trust. And we're looking both intensively, locally, and extensively. This particular area is one of the most critical areas in the state of Maine as far as preserving what's left, and creating buffers against encroachment of development. We've identified key areas based on ecological principles. What we are based on the Royal River watershed. So we're looking at what are the most important pieces of property ecologically? What are the most important pieces that are going to prevent pollution from invading the watershed, getting into the Royal River system, into the estuaries? And we're looking for things like connectivity. We don't just want a bunch of spots on the map. We want to be able to create a cohesive unit so that people can travel from point A to point B to point C. So anything that ties us into larger parcels like Bradbury Mountain, like Pineland, certainly gets a higher value. So it's all part of a bigger plan.
Jesse Peters on the Allen Road. I actually live across from that Sweets Road lot. And I heard what you just said about connectivity and connecting, like the Pineland lot to Bradbury. Currently, there's no trail across that land. There's some old logging roads, but there is no trail. Do you guys plan on putting a trail through there?
At this point, we have no plan to put a trail there. That parcel is actually directly adjacent to a parcel that's currently under our purview. We have Pisgah South and Pisgah North, and our current management plan for Pisgah North, which this parcel abuts, is to pretty much leave it as is, sort of rustic. It's open for people to use as it is now, but we have no current plans within our management plan for the Pisgah property to develop trails there. I can't tell you what may happen 20, 30, 40 years down the road, but right now it's just leave it as is. It's there for the people to use the way it is right now.
Actually, I have a second question. So what this would also do is prevent any type of building in the future on that piece of property. So let's say the town needed something down the road, like a new school or some other facility, it would not be able to be built on any of those lots. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'd have to go and look for land somewhere else to build these facilities.
Yeah, and the town has a number of other parcels that probably would be a lot more well suited to something like that.
Janet Lynch, Elmwood Road, and I am also on the Conservation Commission, but I just wanted to add that also connectivity also means connectivity for wildlife species. Because if you cut up an environment so that wildlife can't move between, unconnected parcels are not that helpful. And you have species like that, fishers and other species that range over a broader environment, right, or area. So that's another important part of connectivity, correct? Am I correct in that, would you say? Yeah.
Come on, we're not bashful and you're not gonna hurt my feelings if you have some tougher questions. So let's have it.
Mark Vashon, Hallwell Road. I would just like to say that I am in agreement with this, as I wish you guys would buy up all the town-owned land in this town. You know, we all live here for a reason. It's our surroundings. It's the openness. And, you know, everyone complains about, you know, tax rates and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we pay for this openness. So, you know, I don't see why it should be such a big deal. You know, honestly, in 60 years, most of us, who really cares what goes on? But, I mean, I think it's a perfect opportunity to allow a piece of property to stay the way it is, and you know, whether people are able to hunt on it or go hiking or fishing, who really cares? But I am all for what you guys are doing, and I appreciate it. And maybe you guys could purchase some more property in this town to, you know, be good enough to have it given to you, just to keep things the way they are.
Thanks, Mark. We certainly do what we can, but we want to make sure, I, not as a resident, but as a member of the board, want to make sure that we're welcome here.
Sorry to drag this out. I just want to make a comment, though. A couple of people have asked about, or that this piece of property is, the town has been approached by someone, by a resident to potentially purchase that property. And, but my understanding is that the Conservation Commission has been working on this project for several years, and this request has just come up recently. Am I correct in that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any more questions?
Question in the corner. Like, they're just waiting for you to ask, Dawn.
Bob Van Milligan, Hollowell Road. Just to add to what Mark said a minute ago, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of this, and I think it's a great first step. I think that we're not gonna, some development we can't control. It's gonna happen on private land. We can channel it, we can't stop it. Here's an opportunity to stop it where it counts the most, and I think that the first step is to do that. I think that we should hang on to all our town-owned lands for doing this in the future. The Conservation Department's working on this now, I understand, future ideas. And we are, I think we're gonna be more and more dependent on these parcels, this and others in the future, for our recreation and well-being as the town begins to close up and develop more and more. So it's going to become even more important, I think, in the future. So thank you for helping in this regard.
Steve Grooverman, Elmwood Road, and two clarifications that might be helpful. I think, is the Royal River Conservation Trust actually purchasing this, or is the town granting it an easement or something like that?
The easement is gonna be taken care of
Yeah,
and watched by Royal River. The property still belongs to Pownell.
so there's no purchase involved.
No.
Okay,
We own the easement, we own the land.
thank you. The other clarification, I think, is that the resident who's requested to purchase two pieces of town land, there's been a request to purchase two plots of town land. And this easement is also two plots of town land, but they're not the same two. The overlap is the Elmwood Road plot. Okay. I wasn't sure that was clear. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do want to finish up, just, my sense is that, the majority here is supportive of this proposal, but we're a minority of the residents of the town. This is going to take a grassroots effort. It's going to take people neighbors talking to neighbors, spreading the word. So if you support it, please talk to your neighbors, and try to gain their support. If anybody has any questions, concerns, you're more than welcome to contact me by phone, by email, knock on the door, whatever. I'm happy to answer questions. You can contact the Royal River Conservation Trust. I'll volunteer Dick and the Conservation Commission as well. You know, we want to make this as open a discussion and a dialogue as possible. We want to educate people, make sure you understand exactly what's being proposed so that there's no misunderstandings and any sentiment of mistrust whatsoever.
I'll just say that we hashed this over for close to 2 years, 3 years that we've been working on it. And there was just, every time you turn around, there was another question, another problem that we could see. And we're at the point now where we pretty much have a working, I think everybody's in approval of it as far as the Conservation Commission and Royal River. I think we've got something that we can work with. And certainly if you need to have another questions, you.
So that being said, we're 2, 3 years into this. What's the next step and the timeline on the next step? Is it a town vote or how do we get this to fruition?
So this is gonna go, if everything works the way we want it to, this is gonna end up on the warrant for this coming year. And it'll be an up or down vote.
Just for clarification, not new special. It'll be on June.
Thank you.
Still have a fair amount of legal consideration. Make sure the interest of the town. Thank you, gentlemen. There are chairs, there are more chairs up here. I think that- John Peter, I think, you can, perfect. So just everybody understands that that was an informational hearing, that there's still work to be done, but the Conservation Commission wanted to present it before the public, just so everyone has information about what they've been doing for a long time and where their focus is. Okay, we now have a public hearing. This will be the planning board for Article 2, and there's a presentation, so we'll get that up and running. Yep. Why don't you, oh, you're gonna have to. Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at this. No text.
Hi, I'm Orion Breen. I'm on the Pownell Planning Board and live on Elmwood Road. We're gonna have a little bit of a virtual presentation if everybody wants to turn their chairs around. It might be useful. Part of this is visually trying to show what we are hoping to do with a new proposed conservation subdivision that we've been working on for a while, and we hope will both preserve rural character while protecting and respecting property rights. And with me today is.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Altieri. I'm the chair of the planning board. Also in the room are several other members of the planning board, as well as other folks who have helped us out in this long and arduous process. Marcia Bowen's here. She's the secretary of the planning board. Let's see, Brian Sternelli is here as well. And I think I saw Todd Mellon a few minutes ago. Am I missing anyone who's here that I haven't seen yet? Okay. We've put a great deal of work, just like the Conservation Commission, with their project. We've put more than 2 years of work into putting this together. It's been a great number of man and woman hours, all volunteer by your neighbors in an effort to comply with what you've asked us to do in the form of the comprehensive plan. So without further ado, I'm gonna leave the floor to Orion.
So as you, well, thank you. As you can see, and as Matt said, you know, the comprehensive plan had a lot of public meetings, had a large survey they sent out. And the planning board has discussed this for a very long time, has had very many public workshops and public meetings. And so the main point we'd like to get across is that the idea of this updated conservation subdivision ordinance comes from listening to you. So the Pownell's comprehensive plan identified a key challenge to keep Pownell as it is, considering inevitable population increases and changing times. Recognize we can't keep Pownell exactly as it is, but we can strive to keep the rural community feel and way of life. And I identified a couple of goals to correspond with that. One goal was to support and encourage the preservation of Pownell's rural character and open space. Another goal to promote housing growth and development types that preserve rural character. And a third goal, protect open space, scenic views, wildlife habitat. Fourth goal, facilitate growth and preservation of local farms. And you can see there's a little bit of a survey example cut out of the respondents. Basically, about 95% of the people say they support or strongly support encouraging preservation of open space, farmlands, and recreational spaces. So the intent of what we'd like to do with the conservation subdivision ordinance, what it does is preserve open space, natural and scenic resources, protect property rights, allow the same number of houses as current ordinances, and create visual buffers to preserve rural character. What we don't want it to do is increase development potential or decrease development potential, to change single home or minor subdivision ordinances, or increase infrastructure costs for taxpayers. So if you think about the current land ordinance we have now, a 2-acre minimum lot size and 300 feet of road frontage is what we have. But the question that came up was, is this really the best way to preserve rural character? You can see this is an example of a typical development where you might have a minimum lot size of 2 acres with a net residential density of 1 dwelling per 2 acres. And this is an example of an alternative development where you have a minimum lot size of 1 acre, but you keep that net residential density of 1 dwelling per 2 acres. Next slide. So by making a smaller lot size, you could potentially preserve more open space, but you're not actually increasing the amount of houses that can be built. So if you look at these two examples, you can start to think about which feels more crowded, which preserves rural character better. But as a planning board, we felt that we could do better than both these examples. Here's another slide that kind of gives an overview of a difference between a conventional subdivision example and a conservation subdivision. You can notice that there's a lot more green space that's preserved under a conservation subdivision. So here's an example of something that could be built under the current ordinance. That's the major subdivision ordinance that we're looking to improve. Example subdivision, 18 acres, you could put 8 houses in with 2 roads, 450 feet long, and a lot size of 2.25 acres. You can see people can get kind of creative with their lot sizes. So you can see there, you have a lot of houses that are very close to the road. And if you live near there, drove by there, you would see potentially a lot of impact and a lot of difference in, driving by here every day. Pownell would feel a lot different. And here's an example of a conservation subdivision. You'd have the same 18 acres and 8 houses, but you'd have 1 road that's longer and you'd have a smaller lot size. And doing it this way, we potentially create a visual buffer for people driving by or people who live nearby. And the houses are farther away from the road and farther away from the neighbors, and you have more of an opportunity to preserve open space that could be used for a variety of uses, even farming uses. So here they are side by side. Again, you can see conservation subdivision ordinance on the left, current ordinance on the right. Again, you see all those houses very close to the road under the current ordinance, and subdivision ordinance creates that visual buffer, and the hope is, not just preserving more open space, but preserve more of that rural character. Pownell's comprehensive plan. This is what we imagine, our vision in the future. In the year 2030, we, the citizens of Pownell, Maine, recognize that ours is a community rooted in our rural nature with open spaces, streams, woods, wildlife habitat, and welcoming residents. We have had measured growth governed by fair and thoughtful land ordinances that have promoted affordable family housing and sustained elderly and/or fixed income housing needs. Independence, privacy, and regard for our neighbors are values prized by our residents. We value our town's natural resources along with our growing community where families may live and thrive. So in addition to tonight, we'll answer some questions that you have for us. There will be a public hearing on December 18th and a vote at a special town meeting on January 22nd.
Can I just make a quick comment? Just so everyone's aware, that presentation is on our website under the December 11th and the December 18th town calendar note. So you can, view the whole thing at your leisure at home.
So just to, before we open the floor for questions and comments, I'll just note, this is a public hearing, so we will do our best to answer any questions that you have about the proposed ordinance. And we'll take any comments that you have as well. We obviously won't deliberate at all tonight. If there are comments that give us cause to, not move the conservation ordinance forward to a warrant, we will take that into consideration. We obviously hope that we move forward to the January special town meeting and that we get an upvote. But we're also want to have the right ordinance for the town. And if that takes more time, then it takes more time. So we want to hear all of your comments, good and bad, and we want to hear your questions as well. So with that, I'll open the floor to anybody who has comments or questions. Yes, Bo.
Sorry about that. Two questions, just with respect to the title, should it be 2024 amendments as opposed to 2023, since it'll be voted on at the special town meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And also in the diagram that you showed where there was a conservation development, it showed a single road going in as opposed to, multiple driveways. Would that be a town road, or would that be a private road that the developer would be responsible and the homeowners would remain responsible?
Thank you. So to get into the nuts and bolts with the roads, I think I heard only one question, but I'm going to answer two. So the question, is it a private road? Yes, it is a private road. And there's required to be subject to a road maintenance agreement that must be submitted and agreed to, and the town's attorney has to review it and approve it. I would also note that in general, the desire in conservation ordinances and conservation subdivisions is to limit the number of roads, but there's also a desire for flexibility, right? So if it allows for, more open space or more creative development in a way that improves sort of the preservation of open space in the lot, then there might be a space for two roads. But in general, I think the preference is for one road.
Okay, thank you.
I take it everyone approves. I knew how to get them up.
So I'm gonna be honest. I think your proposed smaller house lots, more open space is a bad idea. Once again, we live in a rural community. We don't live on Melissa Drive in Yarmouth. I don't think, I know I don't want to look at it. I'm fairly confident that no one else wants to drive by that. I feel that, your 3 to 5 acre, 6 acre house lots one road cul-de-sac at the end, spaced out, is more desirable driving by. I've spent my fair share of time in an airplane and looking down on these friggin' developments that you got one road in with a cul-de-sac with 20 houses in it. Looks like crap.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment.
And they also aren't gonna bring the value to the town. You know, you give them a nice house lot, you build a nice house on it, you sell it for $500,000 or $600,000, $700,000, $900,000. You know, what you're proposing is gonna be a $350,000 cookie cutter. So I think your proposal is basing it on more of a younger generation, which is also gonna bring more cost to the town as far as education goes, where there have been other developments in town that have brought more value to the town and not so much burden upon the town.
Thank you.
I have some bit of a response having gone through this process. Some of the concerns that may have been raised in that comment. I appreciate that comment. Our intention of developing this conservation subdivision ordinance is not to be Yarmouth. The current, as kind of we tried to show in the presentation, the current subdivision ordinance allows a lot of development to happen, and that the development that can happen, we have received feedback that people are not a fan of the current subdivision ordinance. And while this ordinance, this conservation subdivision ordinance that we propose to replace the current major subdivision ordinance, it may not be perfect, but our intention is that it be an improvement. And as you said, people on the current thing, they can put in houses and they can be very close to the road, and it can be, a visual change to the community. And so that's why we put in this version, that there will be a longer road, and we'll take hopefully into consideration the landscape and create a visual buffer and have it go with the landscape so that it is not as noticeable from the road when there is development. And I'll also note that just because we allow the option that people can put in smaller lot sizes, it is not mandatory necessarily that those lot sizes will be incredibly small. And I don't think that we can assume that these developments will, because of the way they're put together, will automatically have a more affordable housing. While that is a piece of our comprehensive plan that we would like to see more affordable housing, we will see what proposals come, but I don't think there's a guarantee that because the ordinance is designed a specific way that you're going to go from a $500,000 to a $350,000 house.
If I could just add one item on there. I think, this is a public hearing. We're here to hear the good and the bad, and I appreciate the comment. I don't want to comment on everyone's comment and sort of engage in a back and forth, but I think this gets it right at the heart of a really core piece of this ordinance. And that piece is really counterintuitive. That is, at first glance, you look at it and you say, really? You're gonna be more rural by having smaller lot sizes? That just doesn't add up. And I agree with you. I've had that experience flying over Ohio and looking down and seeing those cookie cutter homes, and I don't like it. And I don't think that's what Pownell should look like. So I want to be clear, that's not our intent with this. Our intent is to create a lot of flexibility. The counterintuitive part is that what seems like preserving rural character by having large lot sizes, which is historically the way that Pownell has done this, actually just creates a lot of big yards, right, with houses on them. And the idea of this ordinance is to create contiguous open space, connected open space, which is what we all think of, what is clearly called for in the comprehensive plan, preservation of open space, not big front yards, but open space. And so that's our goal. And I agree, it is very counterintuitive. And, you know, I put my word on this and I've had a lot of sort of second guessing myself in this process. It's been a long process. And we've tried to make sure that what we don't wind up with is just a bunch of cookie cutter lots. That having been said, you know, a half-acre lot size is a small lot and that's gonna have some change to the aesthetics. I think our goal is to push a lot of the development, that smaller development, back and give the planning board a little bit more discretion to be able to work with developers to make sure that if they're choosing to have smaller lot sizes, it avoids a visual effect on the neighbors and the broader community, while also really generating value in the form of preserving space that otherwise would have been developed.
But the visual isn't driving down Elmwood Road and not seeing 20 houses stuff up in the woods. The visual is the impact in which it's having on the town directly. It's not what you see driving down the road. You know, I could care less if I live on one end of town and it happens on the other, but it's the town itself. It isn't the visual driving down the road, going to work every day. It's the direct appearance on the town itself. The town of Pownell is opening up a door saying, we're going to allow this. No. You know, these land developers spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's say they buy 100 acres. The state comes right along and they say, you're going to put a third of that into conservation. That's just like that. Now, that only allows them, after they take out their road, to break up the house lot. You need to think about the town as a whole and not just the individual development. And if you downsize that lot size, you're gonna say that, well, you know, maybe they won't take advantage of that small lot size, but nothing's saying that they're not going to. And then we're gonna end up with a friggin' mess.
Thank you. I'd welcome any other comments. Thank you.
A couple of things, Michelle Harrison again. Maybe a couple of things for clarification, because I haven't read everything, but might help with Mark's points. The new subdivision, though, will still, you are only allowed still 4 lots. Is that correct? Or can you have more than 4 lots in that?
There's never been a prohibition on more than 4 lots in a subdivision in Pownell. We have historically had more than 5 lots as a major subdivision and subject to the major subdivision ordinance, you know, I think Apple Blossom and Meadowbrook, right? And then there are less than 5 lots was always a minor subdivision. The one tweak in this is that as of a result of this amendment, 4 or fewer lots would be minor subdivision.
Okay.
For those, the conservation subdivision ordinance is optional. The developer can take advantage of it, but does not have to. For more than 5 lots, the conservation subdivision is required. So the developer has to follow those guidelines. Doesn't mean they have to use less, like half-acre lots, but they have to follow the guidelines, preserving 60% of the space as open space in perpetuity.
So, so when I say 4 lots, let me back up for a minute. In the current limitation, so first of all, I'm not sure that I'm for or against yet. I'm still debating it in my head. So, but I know I'm 100% against the way we do major subdivisions now with the 400 or 450 feet, whatever it is. The limitation of the lot, because it forces us as developers to build our house on main roads. And that's honestly not where I want to build $1 million houses, right on main roads. I want them further in, but we limit how long of a road we can have. So I am in favor of a longer driveway road, whatever, in. So it doesn't matter how many lots, unless you can do a through, you know, like a main road to a main road, you can only get 4 lots. So maybe we're not saying we limit it to 4 lots, but the road size limits it to 4 lots.
Yeah.
Apple Blossom and Meadowbrook, just for the record, was completely different because we had more frontage and we had back lots associated with our subdivision as well. We didn't get any extra lots, even though people in the town like to think we did. We did not. So I want to know for this new conservation, whatever it is, conservation subdivision, are you gonna put more than 4 lots in an area?
So the way that the ordinance works is, so first about the road. So you are, the road can be up to 1,000 feet and the planning board has discretion to allow longer roads. Okay.
Okay.
The requirement is that the developer needs to submit effectively a paper plan to show how many lots they could build under the existing restrictions, both as to dimensions, so the frontage requirements, and the lot density, right, within that particular area. So you have to show what you could do under our existing ordinances. And so in that sense, it's effectively the same limitation, right? So developers won't be able to do more after this is passed, if this were passed, than they could today.
Okay.
So the current rules, Pownell is somewhat unique in that we kind of have a road frontage requirement that limits how many houses you can build. So as you're saying, we have interesting rules. So you can build, if you had like 18 acres, like I showed, you can build like 8 houses in that 18 acres if you have enough road frontage to put 2 roads in. So, and then you have a major subdivision. Our idea with the conservation subdivision is we're not letting people build more than they can already build. Under the current rules, if someone could build 8 houses on this lot, we're saying you can build 8 houses. Even if you have smaller lot sizes, you can only still build 8 houses, but they're built in a better way, we believe, that has less of a negative impact on the town and preserves more open space. And there is definitely, there's a discussion amongst different people in the town where some people would like to see more development and some people would like to see less development. And in this update, we aren't necessarily addressing that. The goal was to be development neutral in a way. We're saying, if we're gonna have growth and development, can we do it in a better way? And if this passes, or if this doesn't pass, there are options for future discussions on, do we want more or less development? But I think this is kind of the first step, is if as we see growth, which is inevitable, people want to come to Maine, they want to come to this area, our current major subdivision rule could be improved. We've got a lot of feedback. And so we attempted in this first step, after many meetings and dialogues with many people, to make our ordinance align more with our comprehensive plan and preserve more open space.
I'm Kate Day, Poland Range Road. My question is it possible to be stricter with how much development you allow, that we allow in Pownell? My understanding is that it's not really possible to be more strict because of the state. Is that correct?
So I think it depends on what more strict means. Pownell has, relative to other towns, very like restrictive guidance, and that typically comes in the form of road frontage requirements, excuse me. It's possible that we could require more frontage, right? There's no state statute that I'm aware of that would prohibit us from doing so. We had a mandate from the town in the form of a comprehensive plan and some objectives with the conservation ordinance. And in looking at options with conservation ordinances, one of the principles that was very clear was that conservation ordinances should be density neutral. So they shouldn't be directed at restricting development or allowing more development. And so that was sort of one of our guiding principles. We wanted to be density neutral, but there's not a prohibition on the town. If there's an appetite for it, and that's clearly expressed, probably to the select board, then there's no restriction that I'm aware of on the town requiring more frontage or having other sort of more strict requirements on development.
Matt Nielsen, Hollowell Road. So my only question on this, and kind of going off what you just said, that would be the only big question that I'd have is comparing that to the 4-lot subdivision, say that we can do right now with a 600-foot road and, you know, the road frontage that we have. So doing this cluster housing, say you have the road frontage you need to do one of these, but you also have the road frontage to also do, say, a second one next to it, in a sense where now it would be bigger lot sizes and you'd have the, you know, 4 houses in there on the whole plot of land, where if somebody came in and they took a smaller section of land that they only needed X amount for, they put one of these cluster or conservation subdivisions in, and then say they wanted to put another one on close to the same plot of land, like adjacent to it, because they broke it into 2 parcels instead of that one. Is there some kind of clause in there that you could add? That's
So we, you got an eagle eye. We sort of went over this several times thinking, well, how are developers gonna sort of work with this to figure out a way to loophole it, right? And that was one that we flagged. And so the only real change to the existing subdivision ordinance that deals with frontage here is that we require for someone to build a conservation subdivision, they need to have 650 feet of frontage, rather than under the existing ordinance, they would need to only have 300 feet, because they could just build the road back from there, right? So, and then there's an additional provision that, so they just need more frontage to do that. We can't sort of regulate unanticipated issues. And so we couldn't figure out a way to say, okay, what if someone has 1,000 feet or, you know, 1,500 feet? So we didn't want to regulate issues that didn't arise before us.
Yeah.
But we did want to address that because we were concerned that it was an obvious loophole.
perfect. And then the only other question would be, would this change what we have in regulations right now for, say, a backlot off this proposed?
There's no, how do I say this? There's no effect on the backlot ordinance. So the backlot ordinance is its own beast. And it is a beast. Like, but we don't address that here, and there's no sort of communication between the 2 ordinances.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Remind people that town is the way it is because of citizens. It was designed by peers. The road frontage description, where they talked about it being unique to town. It was an act of creative genius by a bunch of people who looked at their town and said, maybe it's a good idea to impose a couple of restrictions to not eliminate, but to make thoughtful development. So now you're responsible for considering that the next step. And what you want is down the road. So I appreciate all the work of the planning board, North Star, done a lot of work and a lot of that work. Now, so the workload gets passed on to you. Please read the material. The PowerPoint is on the website. This meeting minutes
Always available for questions and comments.
Yes, if, folks want to communicate with the planning board, and see a question that they have and read through it, you don't want to wait for the, next town meeting, public hearing next week. What's the best way to communicate with the planning board at this point?
You can email me directly. I think my email is online, but if not, I'll give it to Becky to make sure it gets up there.
The Pownell Planning Board has an email
that's
that's on the
right, that's
website. So that's the easiest way to, you can look at the minutes for this meeting and the next meeting and see the presentation we did. This meeting may be recorded as well if you want to see me talking through the presentation on our new YouTube channel, thanks to this great new technology we have here. But yes, please email us, the Pownell Planning Board, your questions. We want, we've discussed this in and out, back and forth, upside down and right side up for more than a year, trying to think, how can we improve things and do so in a way that addresses people's concerns. And so there's a lot of details we've discussed back and forth, and we're happy to dive into that if we don't have time tonight or at the next meeting.
I have one more question. Yeah. I'm Todd Harris. So
In theory, you have, the way it states now, the rules, you have to have 2.07 acres of buildable land, called a lot. Is that correct? So if you have a piece of land that, as of today, I went in there, and it's all gullies and water, you can't, it's not, get one lot out of it, per se, or two. This new rule with these cluster, can you take 1 acre now? Is that all you gotta have to be, or you still have to have 2.07 acres of buildable land?
Yep, so the restriction is effectively the same as it is under existing ordinances. So you take your buildable lot size, you have to calculate it both ways in terms of road frontage and in terms of density and the net residential density in that particular district, which is always 2.07 acres, right? So they both apply. When you submit your paper plan, effectively saying, here's where we would be able to build, how many lots we would be able to build. Yeah.
Per a lot.
Exactly.
But you guys let it go down to smaller ones.
Exactly. It's irrelevant at that point.
And just to clarify, this does not change like single family home zoning. This only applies to if somebody had a lot size that was big enough, like 18 acres or whatever, that they could put in and enough road frontage, where under the current ordinance, they could put in like 8 houses, then this would apply to that. So if you could put in 5 houses under your current system, then this applies to it. But for everybody else, it doesn't affect you. So you're not gonna see a bunch of single, 1 acre lots popping up all over town. Like, we haven't seen a lot of proposals actually for a, 5 to 8, people have enough land and they have enough, and the desire to develop these big lots.
You have it now, maybe not usable, but are these rules letting it be usable?
No.
No, it's the short.
Okay, so I'm gonna thank you, gentlemen, call this planning board public hearing to an adjournment. Next up is a select board public hearing. This public hearing has a tax incremental financing district presentation. We need a minute to set up, or are we all set to go?
Do we want to do that one or do we want to just work down through the other articles? Makes no difference to me.
Just going by the agenda order.
Yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to address the articles. Are you ready, Isabel, to do it? Okay.
Want to introduce it, Isabel? You can have my seat.
Login information for the Zoom meeting so I can share my screen.
I would have to go downstairs and get that. I don't have the login up here.
I'll just talk through it then.
Can you email it to info@panelmain.org and then I can put it up? Okay. While we're waiting for that to come in, this is Isabel Oxley with IOV Community Planning. She's been helping us with the development of the TIF district and the application and sort of all the ins and outs. So she's going to give us a little presentation on what a TIF tax increment financing actually is.
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction. I will just briefly go through sort of the technical aspects of a tax increment financing district. This is sort of a wonky public financing tool, so I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds for a second, and then I'll back right back out to talk more specifically about Pownell's TIF application in general. Once we get that, and I do have some graphics. Most of them I can chat through, but a couple of them I'll want to point your attention to.
Ready for next slide?
Yes. So in general, tax increment financing is a tool that's used to catalyze economic development. This allows municipalities to essentially shelter increases in valuation for up to 30 years under statute, and essentially allows the community to keep revenue local. It's a completely locally driven process, so the town will go through and create their own project list, which is sort of predetermined by statute, but their own project list, decide on the boundaries of the district, and it needs to be adopted locally. In general, TIF revenue can fund a lot of different municipal projects that end up bolstering the community's economic development climate, like sidewalks, trails, public events, even staffing and utility expansion. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So in general, a TIF district is an area with a defined geographic boundary. It can be either one specific project site, so a site that is currently being developed, or like a neighborhood-wide area. Essentially, an original assessed value is taken at the outset of the TIF district as it's being voted on. And then a development program is created and voted on by the town and managed locally that describes the projects that the revenue from the TIF district can be spent on. The applications have to be reviewed and approved by the State Department of Economic and Community Development after that local process. You can go to the next one. There are 4 different sort of special types of TIF districts. A downtown TIF, which is more specific to sidewalks and creating a walkable downtown environment. A transit-oriented TIF, which is usually used in sort of places with bus routes. An omnibus TIF, which is a little bit more technical, but essentially allows the TIF district to create sort of the tax incentives that your comp plan talks about. So direct financial contributions back to developers. And then an affordable housing TIF is sort of what it sounds like. It essentially can give similar financial incentives to developers, but only for affordable housing projects that are qualified under state statute. You can go to the next one. There are a variety of benefits of TIFs. They can assist in achieving economic development goals of the comprehensive plan and other visioning documents. They can attract new investment like tax dollars, jobs, and generally improve the local economy. Obviously, they allow the community to accomplish pretty significant municipal infrastructure projects. And there are tax shift benefits that I'll talk about in just a second. It essentially protects the increase in valuation from county and state revenue sharing formulas. So in the tax increment financing development program, the municipality essentially determines the percent of new valuation, so the increased value that's going to be captured within the TIF. And the state statute allows you to do up to 100%, but you can essentially choose anywhere in between. Any of the valuation that is not sheltered, so anything that is currently being taxed on the property as of today, goes to the general fund for all of your typical municipal projects. After the lifetime of the TIF, which the statute allows to be up to 30 years, all of the revenue goes to the general fund. And there's a graphic about that in the packet of information that was provided for you, but it's also in this slide. The sheltered revenue can be used to support the municipal expenditures either in support of or directly made necessary by economic development, or it can be used to support private investment through the form of credit enhancement agreements. To get a little bit more down into the weeds, credit enhancement agreements are a contract that's negotiated between a town and a developer or business owner. Essentially, the municipality determines the time period, so up to the lifetime of the TIF, and the percent to be shared with the business. And you can do up to 100% of revenue for that specific property. So just to give a more real world example, if I'm a business owner and I want to locate my office in Pownell, and I'm going to be doing some pretty significant investment in the community by building my office building. Essentially what would happen is I might come to the town and approach them about doing a TIF district with a credit enhancement aspect to it. And when I build my office, essentially we'll put a TIF on the property that only captures the value of the land of that property. Then for 30 years, the value of the building that I added to the property will be TIF'd or go into a separate account that can be used for the development program. Or sort of a third option is that I can ask the town for a credit enhancement agreement because I'm providing some sort of public benefit in the form of jobs or utility expansion or something else. And I might approach the town and say, I'm interested in locating here and I would like to bring in this number of jobs, and in return, I will also construct an expansion of your water lines up this road for my business, but any other business can tie in. And then the town might say, okay, great, that's clearly a public benefit. We'll give you some of your tax dollars that you pay us back in the form of a credit enhancement agreement. So that's sort of in brief, what a credit enhancement agreement is. So zooming back out a little bit, in terms of tax increment financing revenue, I mentioned that it shelters revenue from state and county government revenue sharing formulas. This is an important graphic that I'd like you to look at. You probably saw this on your tax bills. Essentially, currently, 38% of your every dollar that you pay in taxes goes directly to the town to pay for municipal services. So your road maintenance, your plowing, your town staff, etc. And then 62% is going to other sources, including your county taxes and your state aid to education. Under a TIF, you shelter essentially that orange piece from the state and county, and you get to keep 100% of your dollar locally for your tax increment financing projects. So I mentioned TIFs shelter the new assessed value from a municipality's state valuation. The state valuation is an equalized assessed value of the municipality. And the valuation of each municipality impacts, things like state education subsidies, county taxes, state revenue sharing subsidies, and your local education contributions. The state aid for education is based on sort of a model from the state. Essentially, a statewide mill rate is applied to a district's state valuation to determine what percent of local property taxes will be needed to fund education. The higher the town's valuation, the more funds need to be raised locally, the less the state contributes, basically. So if you're sheltering value from that formula, essentially the state will contribute more money towards your town. And then similarly, it also increases the municipal revenue sharing that you'll get. So this is sort of a formula that's based on population, taxes raised, and general state valuation. The higher the valuation, the less dollars of revenue sharing is received by a municipality. So you can lower your statewide valuation, you can get higher revenue sharing from the state. And then similarly, county taxes are based on a municipality's percent share of the county's state valuation. So the higher the share of that valuation, the higher the county tax paid. So anything you can do to shelter tax dollar from that valuation can be kept locally. And then just, this is sort of an illustrative example. So this is included in the packet of information. But essentially you have, your base value of your property. So to go back to my example of my fictional office building, you would be able to have the base value of the land going to the general fund for the lifetime of the TIF. And then any additional value from my new construction of my office building is sheltered within the TIF district for up to 30 years. And then at the end of that 30-year period, it all goes to the general fund for all of your typical projects. But at the end of that 30 years, you also lose out on some of that state revenue sharing that we just talked about. So as of September 5th of this year, which was the last available data on the state's website, there were 422 TIF districts across the state, including a number in in Freeport and in North Yarmouth. And then of these, 344 of the TIF districts have the ability to create credit enhancement agreements, or they already have at least one CEA sort of wrapped up in them. And then to get into the details of Pownell's first TIF district. So you can go to the next slide. This is included in your packet, but this is the general district boundaries. It's about 43 acres on the edge of the town, right down the road here, actually on the border with North Yarmouth. These specific parcels were chosen. One of them, map 8, lot 23, it's the largest parcel there, has a approved project on it. It's a greenhouse commercial agriculture project that was approved by the planning board in, I believe, July of last year. And they are set to begin construction in the springtime. And then in general, we kind of looked at any parcels with frontage on Route 9 that had sort of significant development or redevelopment potential. So they were vacant parcels. They didn't have a lot of wetlands. They weren't in the shoreland zone. And then I feel comfortable saying this because they mentioned it in a public meeting. These ones are also being considered by the same developer of the commercial agriculture site for a potential purchase. We also specifically chose this area as sort of the pilot area because there is 3-phase power, which is a utility that's typically needed for some of these larger economic development projects that Pownell currently doesn't have, available about 0.3 miles down the road from the district in North Yarmouth that could be expanded into Pownell for some further projects. Currently, the application was created to capture 100% of the increased in assessed value over the 30-year period for the designated projects that I included in your packet of information. This original assessed value is currently about $394,000. It creates about $7,500 in taxes on an annual basis. That amount will continue to go to the general fund, and then any increase in assessed value over the next 30 years, so any new construction, any taxable new construction will go into a separate TIF account for the projects that are specifically outlined in your packet. And then we also, as I mentioned, put in an omnibus capacity or capability. This will allow for credit enhancement agreements to be negotiated by the select board for up to 100% of increased value of a specific business property. We currently don't have any credit enhancement agreements contemplated in this packet of information. So anything further would need to come before the select board for a public hearing. And we put in some noticing requirements there that sort of match other ordinance requirements in the town currently for advertising those kinds of public hearings. And then I've been mentioning a lot sort of certain designated projects. So in this instance, the certain designated projects are sort of limited by state statute. That's all the numbers that you see referenced in the table. But we have put in there general economic development work, so a prorated portion of both the town administrator and the town planner salaries commensurate with the work that they're sort of expected to do around economic development in the town. We also put in a small amount for consultant and legal costs for sort of the upkeep of the TIF district. And then we also put in money for agricultural events. So generally earmarking funds for a year-round farmers market or other sort of endeavors. We earmarked funds for credit enhancement agreements. We also earmarked funds for expansion of three-phase power that I mentioned. And then we also finally earmarked some funds for a new public safety building and a fire station and equipment for that, that's specifically related to any new economic development. It has to be a prorated amount by the state. Okay, I think I threw a lot of information at you and we got very technical very quickly. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have. I know that this is sort of an amorphous subject, but I'm happy to clarify anything if I can.
Bill Schmidt, Poland Range Road. Is it my understanding that the tax revenue that is sheltered through this TIF has to be spent on this purple area? Is that correct?
No.
Or somehow related to it?
No, it does not need to be spent within that purple area. You are limited sort of in the amount of money that you can earmark for projects, but it does not need to be spent within the purple area. It can be spent across the town for a variety of projects. Yeah.
Steve Grooverman, Elmwood Road. I'm a little confused about the timing of this. The TIF has to go into, is it going to be voted on by, it's part of the, it's going to be on a warrant for town meeting. So, but it sounds like the construction on this property is going to start before that happens.
So this is intended to be voted on at the January town meeting.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Yes, and it needs to go to the state by March 1st.
Or the construction starts.
Or the construction,
Got
exactly.
it. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Bo Chesney on Lawrence Road. The cost estimates that you're showing in the, I think I pulled it off the town website. Those are just cost estimates. Those are not limits under the proposal. Is that correct?
Actually, sort of the opposite. So those are essentially the limits that can be spent out of the TIF money. I think I put a note in there that I'll just sort of read. Essentially, the TIF revenues from this district might not fully fund each of the projects that are listed below. So, but also in addition, inclusion on this list does not require the town to utilize TIF revenues for these specific projects. Inclusion on this list makes it permissible for the town to apply TIF revenues towards these projects if they're undertaken during the term of the district. And essentially, the town intends to incorporate TIF revenue expenditure conversations and decisions into the annual budget process. These are max caps that can be spent out of the TIF accounts, but are not formal cost estimates for any of these projects.
Okay, so they're caps, cumulative cap for over the life of the TIF,
Yes, over the 30-year life.
or the 30-year life of the TIF. Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, and I haven't tried to put figures to what the TIF, what the incremental tax revenue would be. But under number 3, and I'm on the Future Facilities Committee, so it's kind of one of my questions relates to that. So it's being capped at $550,000 that could be over the life of the TIF, could be directed to, say, cover debt service associated with a new facility of some sort in the town. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, just one other thing. I noticed in the presentation on the web, I think it was a typo, but it was a little confusing under the overview. You said the overall, the original assessed value of the district is $394,500. The current tax is $243,958. So
No.
it just,
But thank you for pointing that
corrected up there.
Yes, it's about 7,500 annually.
I have a question about this TIF expands beyond just the Estabrooks to other privately owned properties. So what does that do to the private owner? I mean, does it create a pressure for them to move or how are they affected by this is my question.
No, that's a great question. So, frankly, if they never sell, if they continue to own that property and they never build on it, this is sort of a speculative exercise. So we've tried to be conservative in our estimates, especially around the costs, just basing it on the existing approved projects cost estimates, which were provided during their planning board information. Essentially, if those property owners never sell, never move, never build on it, it doesn't necessarily impact the cost estimates that we've provided for in this application. And it doesn't change the underlying zoning. It doesn't change anything. They could keep living there and it wouldn't necessarily impact the way that they utilize that property.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Previous question, triggered one of my own. As overall valuations increase, say the homeowner, residential lot owner, value increases over the life of the TIF and they're in that TIF. Does the incremental increase in just general valuation due to market forces other than development, does that go into the TIF as well?
Yeah, it actually does. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. If the town goes through a full revaluation and the properties within the TIF go up, it's basically paused at the original assessed value, which is as of this tax year. So any market forces would also add to the incremental value of the TIF or the captured assessed value.
Okay, so any increase in value from the day the TIF is voted in the district,
Any
You-
increase in assessed value.
in assessed value. Okay, fair enough. Any increase in assessed value would automatically go into the TIF fund.
Yes. Well, not automatically.
Well, up to 100%.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bill Schmidt again. How flexible or restrictive is table 4 if 6 months from now we wanted to add something else?
So, I guess I'm going to caveat that, number 3, where public safety building is discussed, is pretty restrictive because statute has a specific limitation there. But, again, going back to my comment about this being sort of a speculative exercise, if, you get 10 years into the TIF, or maybe even 5 years into the TIF, and all of a sudden there is quite a bit of development on those properties, and you want to update the numbers, you would have to go through an exercise where you would amend the TIF through a town meeting vote, if you needed to change those those cost caps.
Just the numbers, but how about the items?
The items can also be changed in that same way. So if there was another priority that was decided, 10 years from now with the next comp plan or something like that, you could also go through and amend the TIF. And, there are municipalities that are going through 7, 8, 9 amendments on their TIF districts, through the 30-year lifetime. So it's certainly possible. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm curious, who in the town has done the work on getting this, bringing this to a vote? Is it the select board or the planning commission or?
So I am a consultant that's been primarily working with the select board on this project.
Okay. So I just wanted to, my naive understanding of this is that it's kind of like free money for the town. And so I wanted to express my appreciation for whoever put in the work for this to make that happen.
It was a collaborative effort. Members of the budget committee were in on it.
Okay.
Bo did quite a lot of legwork in the beginning. So.
Because I know that you all have plenty to do and it sounds like you took a little extra on and it's greatly a benefit to the town. Appreciate that.
Orion Breen, just to build upon that, so it's my understanding that, if somebody put a bunch of money into this property and the TIF wasn't there, that would increase the valuation for the town. And thus, the state could potentially say, your town has a lot more tax revenue, we're gonna give you less school money. So what the TIF does is it lets development happen in this area that might potentially would happen otherwise, but that it saves that money. The state says, okay, to put that money in a box, and we're not gonna let that affect your school funding, and you can take that money and invest that into your town or into. All right, sounds
So it
pretty
keeps
good.
that 58% number that I mentioned locally rather than going to your state and county sharing.
So are there any other questions at the first public hearing of the select board for a tax incremental financing district? Isabel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just need to address one question. Since the Estabrook family purchased a lot and announced the project, one of the underlying reasons for considering to present a TIF to the town meeting vote is that there have been, to date, 2 overtures by different businesses that are both agriculturally based that would consider coming into the town of Pownell depending on infrastructure. So it would not be foolish to try to have a conversation with different businesses that might be considered in keeping with a rural development, agriculturally based, to piggyback on Estabrook's development. I mean, in terms of speculative, that it's certainly, we're certainly speculating, but we're also understanding the impact property taxes have on each individual property owner, and would love to diversify that tax base if we could. TIF may be the ingredient to help other like-minded businesses come into the town of Pownell in a specific area. I hope Isabel's answer to Marcia's question was clear, that there's no pressure on the town for the town is not in the business of denying personal property or individual rights, but we're just trying to make it possible for people to consider a diversified tax base. That makes sense to everybody? That's where the vision from the select board is coming. And other committees. I can't speak to those other committees. So, this is the first of a public hearing on the TIF district. There will be another one on the 18th. The information is posted on the website.
Oh, and I'll make sure, well, you have my presentation, but I'll send you a PDF so you can post that as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Isabel. Excellent. Thank you for your patience, you guys. Great. Next is
So we have a couple of warrant articles to just quickly talk about.
Okay, we now have a couple of warrant items that we need to have a public hearing on. There'll be 2 public hearings in these warrant items, so thank you for your attention. Becky.
Okay. Article 3 is pretty straightforward. straightforward. That is just allowing us to transfer and appropriate money from unassigned fund balance for the brown tail moth program. And then once we're reimbursed from that money, from the grant program, the money would go back into the unassigned fund balance. So that one's a pretty straightforward. Any questions on that one?
We received $16,000 from the state to help mitigate the brown tail moth infestation. There are certain parameters that require the select board to get town meeting approval to access that grant. So that's why this is on the special town meeting warrant.
Ryan?
So with this grant money, can that be spent basically addressing brown-tailed moths anywhere in the town and potentially on private land, seeing how if private land has brown-tailed moths that can spread anywhere to different neighbors and onto public land as well?
Absolutely. It's to assist private property owners and other entities to help mitigate brown tail moth infestation and mitigation. So hopefully the 5th grade in Pownell Elementary School is going to have a presentation next month about the program, and we're anxiously looking forward to collaborating with the youngsters. So that'll be fun. Andy.
Just to clarify, we're borrowing $16,000 for upfront money from the unassigned fund balance that will be paid back when the state gives us the $16,000 from the grant.
They're not giving us the money up front. We'll spend it, then show that we spent it. In order to do that, we have to take money out of our unfunded, unassigned fund balance. Okay. Oh.
So the full 16,000 we transfer. And yet we may not spend the 16,000, so we may not get reimbursed.
We're only gonna get reimbursed for what we spend,
Okay, so.
and what we don't spend will go back to unassigned fund balance.
That, I don't think that should, that article does it.
Should it say up to? That was my thought when I was reading it a little bit ago, so.
Good, thank you, Bo. Okay,
Okay, Article 4, we received federal ARPA funds and we have to start allocating them. So this article is asking to replace basically all the town office, public works and fire department computers. They are about 5 years out of date at this point. So that is just the use of grant money we have already received. I did want to bring up that in talking with our networking company that we need to actually upgrade our server computer to be in compliance with cybersecurity. We pay for cybersecurity now and insurance through MMA, and that requires a much larger, more maintained firewall. So it's managed. I would know who was on it by giving passwords. It protects the confidentiality of documents, things like that. So that actually would change the amount from 17,000 to 20,000 to 2186. We had built in a little bit of extra just in case there was a slight price change in the next 6 weeks on the $17,000 one. So my suggestion, if we wanted to go up and add that better server computer, would be to at least consider 21 or 21.5 for that.
does everyone understand that? So we've been given, what's our current ARPA fund balance?
So we received $163,788.95. We have allocated 50,000 of that at last town meeting. So that leaves us a balance of $113,788.95.
That was a grant that we applied for And I'm pretty sure
It's received, all towns got it from the federal government for coronavirus, basically mitigation.
We,
So
we didn't apply. They
Yep.
just.
they gave it
handed
to us.
Oh,
Is that strictly hardware cost or would it include software, pay for the server and?
It's everything. It's hardware installation, migration of documents, disposal of old computers.
okay, so that'll be on the warrant. Because we'll need town meeting approval to use grant money to buy the computers. In addition to that, Becky?
Okay, Article 5 is just correcting an accounting error from about 3 years ago. We were cleaning up some accounts at town meeting. And when sort of reading in the trio line, we read one line, but then read description of the next one. And so this is just returning $4,491 back to the fire truck fund balance where it should have stayed 3 years ago. So it's just a quick accounting correction.
That needs to be voted by the town meeting. Any questions?
Okay, Article 6, and Isabel, are you still here? Okay, so Isabel wrote this article for us, and then literally like this morning, the town attorney came back with her edits, and it's a 2-page article. So Isabel actually emailed me and said that she felt that it didn't quite need to be this long. So do you mind coming up and just talking for a quick second, Isabel, about this?
So I am not want to argue with attorneys. So if that's the advice that your town attorney gave you, I'm comfortable with her edits. I will just know, I don't know that it necessarily needs, I would argue that it didn't need to be that long, but I'm fine with her edits as she has drafted them. So
Okay.
no complaints from my end about editing my work.
We like to hear Bo read them anyway, so.
Okay.
Sorry. So it'll be it'll be similar to what you see in Article 6, except for you'll need to bring a monster drink to. But it's just protecting, it's really protecting the town's interest. That's all it's doing. It's just making sure that we don't miss anything, as lawyers will do.
The intent is similar, is the exact same.
Same thing.
Okay, thank you. The final piece, which you don't see on the draft warrant, so on Thursday, when we arrived to work, the furnace wasn't working. So after getting it working and having a boiler tech really look at it, the furnace is in need of replacing here at Town Hall. It is 20+ years old and it has sort of met with its life expectancy. The inside is all cracked and it's sort of leaking water and it's working for now, but the for now could be 1 week or a couple of months. We're not sure. So they did give us a couple of estimates. One would be replacing the current boiler system, which is also has a heating coil in it, which heats hot water 24/7, 365 days a year. The other option, that was around 15,000. The other option was separating to an on-demand heater. So we only literally have 3 hot water faucets in the building that use hot water. So we didn't see the need maybe to be heating water 24/7. So this would replace it and it would have a direct vent and bypass the chimney because in the first aspect, the chimney also needs to be relined too. So that would bypass that. And that was about 20,000. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the regular meeting, we're going to discuss if we're going to add a warrant article. So I was hoping by having this discussion in a public hearing, it wouldn't add another public hearing to this warrant in 3 weeks as we get ready. So we have the estimates right here. ABG Heating and Cooling was the one that came and did it. He did some basic key points, which I have said. And then they also gave us what the warranties would be on each of the systems. So that is what we're looking at here now.
All right, so the purpose of our discussion at a public hearing is to not circumvent, but to alert the town that the select board in its regular meeting is going to be discussing adding another warrant item on the special town meeting to replace the current boiler with a new boiler using ARPA funds. And since we've already brought before the town a warrant article using ARPA funds, we're adding to that particular warrant item. We will bring that up, depending on what we decide on our select board meeting, at our next, thank you so much, Isabel, at our next public hearing on the 18th. Just so everyone's clear. So we're not like, I think Orion, you have a quick question, Orion?
My question.
Great.
Yeah, but it may mean that there's some rebate opportunities from the main efficiency for efficiency gain, based on the design.
Yep. Yep, thank you. Bill.
Bill Schmidt, would this also be an opportunity to look into heat pumps?
So there's a long answer to that. We're currently looking at or investigating using heat pumps on the majority of the old part of the building. We're currently investigating developing a solar plan for the buildings. That is with efficiency main. So this is a separate, we're trying to, I think, trying to address the new part of the building with the infrastructure and gas. We are. It's a kind of a different need. Mark?
So I understand, obviously, we gotta replace the heating system. Down the road, I would entertain exploring new heating systems. But, and I don't even know if the committee's been created yet, but I know that down the road, we're gonna build maybe one building to suit Public Works, Fire Department, and what have you. So do we want to go outside the box and spend unnecessary money when, let's say, 10 years down the road, we build another building and this one's empty anyway? Or can we just replace what needs to be replaced at the cheapest cost to get us through until that building is created?
There's a Mallet Hall Building and Grounds Committee that is looking at the long-term perspective of this building. I think the reality is we need to heat what we have now, so we're gonna have to do something. And
I just don't think that we need to go outside the box and reinvent the wheel and put this big elaborate system in when we could just spend $20,000 and put an oil burner in, you know what I mean? Instead of spending.
I don't think there's any, I think there's no big elaborate system in the works. I think we're talking to Efficiency Maine to see. There are a lot of what ifs. And
because I mean,
it doesn't hurt.
No,
It never hurts to talk.
But I mean, if we hung, if you guys decide to put heat pumps in here, it's gonna cost a lot more than it would to just replace the boiler straight up.
Maybe we'll use some local agriculture, some cattle farmers to use a little methane digester to keep us going. You're absolutely right.
Well, there's a town beside us that went through this about 10 years ago, and they closed the school down in less than a year. I mean, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and then, we're gonna.
Every dime that we spend, you have the opportunity to vote on.
I vote every time.
And
Thing I don't take is a sticker.
So, are there any questions? And you'll have another opportunity on these warrant items, including the select board's recommendation for a new furnace on the 18th. A reminder that the special town meeting is on January 22nd. Almost said June, boy. And I appreciate all your participation and your thoughtfulness. Remember, all this information is homework for you. I know we all sort of resent homework, but you have the opportunity to look through everything. It's on the website. Please come back on the 18th with any questions. Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to go back to Article 6.
regarding this, since it's gonna be a multi-page ordinance, that sort of agreement, can we just have it as an attachment? Like the article read, to adopt the, article as written instead of as written. You don't have to read it.
Yeah, let me take a look at the wording because she ends it with as amended as follows, and then the as follows is the basically next page and a half. So let me see. Yeah, I can reach out to her and say, can we amend it so that that's part of it? I think it has to be the way she's done it, part of the warrant itself, the way that she has it written. So.
We'll have oxygen there for when you finish.
So we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes so that we can catch our breath and then go into our regular select board meeting. So you're more than welcome to stay for that. But I have to get up and walk around for a minute. Right. All right, next item on our regular select board meeting is account payable warrant number 14, the amount of $33,691.06.
I'll move that we pay fiscal year 24 AP warrant number 14 in the amount of $33,691.06.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to play AP warrant number 14, the amount of $33,691.06. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is payroll journal number 220, the amount of $9,587.55.
I'll move that we pay payroll journal number 220 in the amount of $9,587.55.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to pay payroll journal number 220, the amount of $9,587.55. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. This is the minutes of select board meeting on November 27th, 2023. Wonderfully taken by Kathy Hogue. Accept the motion.
I will move that we accept the minutes of November 27th, 2023 as printed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept select board minutes of November 27th as written. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity from any resident of the town of Powell to step forward and be heard by the select board in any matter which you deem necessary, relevant, or important. Is there any person from the?
I'm just wondering why that monitor is here and it be up there. Because it was hard for everybody turning around, half turning around.
So when I originally had met with people, I'd actually talked about 2 monitors because if we're facilitating a Zoom meeting with at-home participation, we need to be able to see them there. So that was somehow in a lot of the proposals, it got trimmed down to 1. And then the Cumberland County ARPA chose the final contractor, which only had the 1, and we put it up there because of the need for facilitating Zoom down the road. I thought about that today, like when we do use that, we'd have to turn here and there. But all those documents today that were up there are on the website and can be viewed later on for everybody as well. So.
Would we be able?
Really good to live around.
Would we be able to purchase another one to put over here at some point?
We probably could. Yep.
And people back there.
So you would still do it.
Not a perfect world.
It's
I-
not.
I hear what you're saying. It's not a perfect world. So grateful that are where we are right now. For your comment, thank you. Any other, members of the public?
No tax.
Hearing none, moving on to department head reports. All department head reports can be read on the website. You click on the department and the department reports are found there. Site, for the select board member, if there's any questions, any department head here. Hearing none, the select board head report.
No.
No. Okay. Under new business, special town meeting warrant edits, the Mallet Hall furnace repair. Becky, you're on.
So I did, thanks for pointing out the 2024. When the article was originally amended, the town meeting was going to be in 2023, and I didn't catch that. So thanks for pointing that out. So I'll fix that. On Article 3, I'm going to add the words up to. Article 4, do we want to amend that to
21.
21? That gives us about $800 cushion. Okay, so we're gonna amend that one. Article 5, I think is good. Article 6, we're going to amend to the town attorneys, and I'm gonna check to see if we can have that as attachments versus part of I'll double check with her and just see. And then now we would consider an Article 7 for the furnace.
Andy, what's your suggestion based on that?
My suggestion, even though it's the higher price, it's gonna save us money and gas in the long run because we're not heating water constantly, would be to go with the second estimate.
Hey, what's your thought about that?
Do we have a sense for whether it will save us that much money? Roughly $4,000.
I'm gonna bet that that boiler runs about 7 times a day more than it needs to just to heat hot water.
Plus it's heating in June, July, August, when we're not even running it for heat, just because it's got the heater coil in it.
I have one in my barn and I switch it off.
Andy, would you like to make a recommendation?
So I will make a motion that we make warrant article number 7 with an up to amount of $20,000 for the purchase of a new boiler and hot water heater for town hall.
For use of ARPA funds.
With, yes, with use of ARPA funds. You knew that.
Just getting it in the minutes.
I will second that motion. So it's been moved and seconded to approve up to $20,000 from the ARPA fund to replace the heating system. Is there any further discussion?
If we get a rebate from Efficiency Maine, is that what that is? It's just a rebate? Does that still apply if we've used ARPA funds to purchase it?
Yes, I think it would still apply just fine. Yeah.
We just put it into a select person. That was a great question.
You did.
Any further discussion? Saying none, take the vote, all in favor? Motion carried, so that'll be Article 7.
Correct. So I will edit the header to say Articles 1 through 7 now. And did anybody see any edits that needed to be in the greeting? Think I've got the dates and everything right, but while there's extra sets of eyes, just make sure. Okay. Perfect. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's where you get in trouble with copy and paste.
Exactly.
All right, so we'll review this again on the 18th. Next item on the agenda is the diminishing federal ARPA grants.
So, Tom and I have been talking about other, options and items. So let's see, so we were down to 113,788.95. We just allocated 22,000, so that's gonna bring us down, just under $90,000 left. So just in consideration for the annual town meeting in June, we still want to talk about ideas of how we want to use that money because we do have to have it allocated by the end of 2024.
We're asking for 41 on the warrant.
Oh, that's right. We added another 20,000, so that brings it down to 70,000. Thank you for that reminder. My math was before the furnace article, so. Yes. Tom, did you want to come up so we could just talk about a couple of the things that we talked about? Sure. Okay. We can share mics if you want, or you can sit over there.
Well, first of all, good evening. I'm your new town planner. I started up in October. I'm at your service. So if I can be of any help in any way, stop by and say hello and we'll solve the problems. As to ARPA monies, the town administrator and I have been looking at what some of the potential uses might be. The furnace was an unexpected cost, of course, but a critical one. Other opportunities that might possibly be used, and cost estimates and cost analyses haven't been done on these things that I'm going to speak about. One would be, well, first of all, Becky, had you brought up and discussed the computer system?
Yes, that is on the January town meeting.
Okay, and also the cybersecurity.
That is included in that article.
So, so the computers, there are some renovations that are critical to town hall in terms of providing space to meet with the public, some department space. We're kind of clustered together right now, and we're trying to refine how we might best lay out some office space. Part of that would be tying in the computer systems, obviously, the heating of the rooms. And the sort. So that's one possibility. Also, we have in a limited discussion, discussed the facade entry point where the deputy clerk is. In these times, that plastic window should be of both of concern and also of more protection in terms of town staff. A cost estimate will be looked at, and it's not a major cost, but it's a cost estimate that has to be done next week. I believe that Portland Glass will come by just to give us a sense of what that cost is. So those are some of the things that have been considered. Additionally, pardon me, the Economic Development and Sustainability Committee is closing in on the completion of a study that they've been doing with Greater Portland COG. It's now looking at what its next second phase of that study will be. The startup of that will happen perhaps as early or as January or February of next year. And one of the things that we've been investigating is the town's greatest asset, which is water or lack of water. Given that most of your aquifers lay on the periphery of town, it's important to be looking ahead in terms of things, whether it be fire suppression. If there is a long-range forecasted plan for a village development, any type of small-scale village development that would be appropriate for the town would require water. So those are some of the things that we're working on. Do any of the committees, or Marcia, can you think of any others that we've talked about? from a planning board perspective? No, okay. Bo? Thanks for bringing that up, Bo. If we apply for federal funds, for any type of facility improvements, we're already looking at fiscal year on the federal calendar for 2025. Part of that review process is that, let's say on facility planning, there has to be an environmental assessment, and in some cases, an environmental impact statement prepared in advance of requesting federal monies. So we're trying to look ahead there too, in anticipation of seeking out some very large monies. These monies are congressional dedicated monies, somewhat similar to earmark monies. If we were to apply for that on the town's behalf, it would require an environmental assessment as part of the application process. So we're looking ahead of where monies might come from to pay for that type of a study that would be appended to the application. In addition, if I may, we're also looking at the potentiality of any state monies, although smaller in size. There may be some opportunities that we're aware of which there will be monies available at the top of the year for water infrastructure. So that's a long answer to how we might potentially use ARPA monies. I think the critical thing that our town administrator and the select board have continually stressed is that you have to obligate those monies before really next spring. And so the obligations have to be established early or lose the monies. Okay. Alrighty. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, so I have a feeling we'll find a place. Next item on the agenda is real estate request map 9 lot 43.
Okay, we are on the next step of the town-owned real estate request policy. So we have gone through the 60-day comment form where our abutters, department heads, boards and committees have all submitted comments, which I sent the bulk of them to the select board last week. A few more came in. I have all the originals right here if we want to reference them. We did have one come in the mail this afternoon, just delayed in transit. And yep, that came in. So at this point, the next phase is for the select board to discuss the comments and determine if it's going to move to the annual town meeting warrant for the town to vote on.
Well, in light of the pending possible conservation easement, in light of all the town projects, which would include property, I would say that it should not be included on the town warrant.
I can attest to the work that the Pownell Conservation Commission has already put into looking into this lot being put into an easement, and that work has been going on for quite some time. And say, based on the feedback, it's probably advisable to not sell that one.
Okay, so just so that the public knows, the process is a cover request was put in to purchase town land. There's a process, a procedure that the select board goes through. They reach out to butters and all town committees and commissions and boards for input on whether or not those committees, commissions, boards feel it's advisable for the town, for the select board to move the request, the purchase request to the town warrant meeting. Has to happen at a regular town meeting warrant, meeting, sorry. And the overwhelming response, we had quite a bit, was that the town should not move forward and consider purchasing the land. The town meeting would have to decide on that if the select board decided to move forward, but I am going to recommend that we not do that. Both requests forward based on all the commissions and boards that are public. So I move that we do not move those requests for purchase vote town land forward.
I'll second that.
Second, is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Next item on the agenda is Mallet Howell Buildings and Grounds Committee Chair.
It's already here. There it is.
It should be in there. So I had a couple edits. The term of office needs to be 1 year. That's a state statute. So that would need to be changed back to 1 year. Yep.
Oh, number two.
Yep, the second bullet. And then down under duties, 1, 2, 3, 4, the committee will communicate recommendations for any change or upgrades to the town administrator and the select board and may help with. I'm just wondering if may help with still leaves it very gray as far as what
I think
that would
was the
entail.
intent.
Okay,
Because it might be you or the select board who finds a contractor or whatever, but if you request us to help, or will you do
Okay.
some your research for us, and will you make a call, we could help with.
okay.
But it's not necessarily our first duty.
It's,
Does that make sense?
it's helpful to understand,
Yeah.
yep, where you're coming from with that statement right there. So those were the only two key points that really stood out to me on that one. Just reading through.
Well, I agree with that. The committee will communicate recommendations for any changes or indoor upgrades with the town administrator. Yeah. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, so the assignment will be to take this home, look at it, and we'll bring it up at our next.
So Jan Peter and I had a brief couple of minutes to talk, and he had a suggestion that the chair of the Mallet Hall Buildings and Grounds has a standing once a month meeting with the town administrator, myself, to just make sure that the lines of communication are going back and forth and information is being fed. I thought that was a really good idea as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm the chairman of the Mallet Hall Committee. We did, Kathy and I rewrote the thing, and Kathy did a splendid job writing it up, and thank you very much doing it. There are not a lot of changes actually in the charge, and I don't think there was a need for it. The biggest changes were in the future planning. But I think when we talked about it, I think the charge of the Mallet Hall Committee has changed over time a little bit, because the relationship between the committee and the town, and specifically the relationship between the committee and the town administrator and the board has changed over time. I mean, when this hall was built in 2000, the committee was very much involved with the physical work in the hall, and we painted and we repaired and we did a lot of stuff like that. That became less and less actually, whereas lately after the Boyles actually left, we were mostly involved with roof repairs and painting and bigger projects. But the town itself has changed, because like 15 years ago, we had a town clerk. Now we have a town administrator with a greater amount of responsibilities. It is tough to actually communicate with the town, because she's a very busy person and has a lot to do every day. Whereas we meet twice or three times a year and we look at the bigger stuff that has to happen at the hall. So what is important is I have been trying to communicate with Becky, but it's tough for Becky because she has so much to do. And there's a lot of stuff happening that we as a committee should know about that we quite often don't know about. Like, for example, I mean, the furnace, I didn't know it. The elevator, I believe, has been fixed totally. I had no idea it was. I know there was a partial fix, but those are things that as a committee, we ought to be knowing about. So in order to rectify that, I think it's a good idea if the chairman of the committee, whoever that may be, will have a meeting maybe with Becky for once a month for half an hour, and we bring each other up to date. And if there all of a sudden appears to be a need for the committee to get involved, then we can. For example, there was talk about the town needed more office space. Well, there are 2 rooms available, and the committee would have been happy to get involved in looking at the rooms and looking at the possibilities of those rooms and then deciding together what ought to be done. We were not aware of that. So the big word is communication, and I think if that's okay with you guys, we'll do that. All right? Okay.
All right, so that's homework. Next item is town funds and investment policy. I think we're gonna have a presentation.
I think so, if he's done talking.
We're talking. Present.
If you'd like to sit, you can.
Okay, this is just the step back from a budget committee had been asked to look at, the issue was raised whether the town could be better investing idle funds or excess funds, to enhance yields and returns to the town, and how those funds were handled, and also what was some of the accounting behind that. Specifically, the CIP fund was discussed, and whether those funds were formally segregated or not, and whether they could be invested because there's a perceived timeline as to when they might be spent, and there may be some investments that could tie into that might enhance the yields. So with that in mind, and I apologize because it's taken me almost a year to get this done. But in November, I did talk to Carrie Lewis and Rose Moran at TD Government Banking Group, who is the point group within the bank for helping towns like us, municipal financing. And so in general, you know, we're doing a pretty good job. In fact, is typical with a main operating account, be it municipal or even corporates environments. Those accounts are the bank will give credit on a monthly basis for the balances maintained to help offset the fees that are associated with the activity in the account, deposit fees and whatnot. Given the magnitude of our funds that we have with TD in our main operating account, the excess funds have well offset any fees, and they in turn give us additional earnings or interest based on even those excess funds. So we have been getting some benefit from those funds. The CIP fund is in fact segregated fund, and that is been earning a money market rate. And some of the other accounts, I think virtually all the accounts have been earning basically a money market rate to one degree or another. They weren't consistent I don't think the bank was really looking at the accounts as a whole, and was really looking at individual accounts. When you ask the question, just in the conversation, you see, well, I think I can tweak this rate for you a little bit here and a little bit there. So just the conversation enhanced the yield a little bit. But there are opportunities for us to have a more formal process for investing our funds. And the first step in doing that, I think, is to have establish what our policy is. So that I know the select board has worked hard to document policies so that everyone knows what the game plan is. There's transparency as to how things are being handled, and there's guardrails placed on folks that need to operate within those procedures. And I think that would be the first step to do for our investments and how we're handling cash management. And I've had discussion with Andy about working together, and I think Matt Roy on the budget committee has volunteered to give us a hand on that, and Becky has volunteered to chase down find out what other towns have for investment policies. My opinion is that it should not be overly restrictive. It should be relatively broad. State law gives the select board and the town treasurer authority to invest the funds, and it has, within the state law, it has parameters in terms of the types of investments. But within that, there may be some procedures that we look at of how we want to handle the CIP fund, how we want to handle some other kind of permanent funds like the cemetery commission, perpetual fund, and things like that. That we can set up a fairly straightforward system, and then Becky has her marching orders, and we can help her with that if she wants, in terms of working with TD and any other bank that we may want to consider. And there are other banks out there. I did cover, believe it or not, fewer and fewer. But I did have a preliminary conversation with Bath Savings, for instance, and they do have, a group that would help us as well. Are they as sophisticated as TD? I don't know, but anyway, so that's the next step, in my opinion, to get that draft procedure out so you guys can take a look at it.
Great. So Becky, your charge is to investigate other towns.
Yes, I'm going to reach out. I'm on a network of town administrators and managers throughout the state. So I'm going to see if I can get sample policies so that we can maybe use some phrasing or wording and see how it's structured to get us started.
So if we get a good sample, then we will distribute that to Bo and Matt and the board, and we'll start working on that.
Yes.
That's some work. It's a long time. So thank you very much. Yes. We will take this up next meeting, because other homework is look at the conclusions and see how a new policy would address those conclusions.
Yeah, I will say that I made a mistake in the first conclusion in terms of recommending the CIP fund be segregated. It is segregated. Yeah, so that's
You're allowed.
and excuse me?
You're allowed. To mistake.
Okay, and the interest is goes back into that fund. So but there may be some there may be something that we have to include in the town annual town vote or at least have a article that stipulates specifically that any earnings in the CIP fund or any permanent fund like that go back in. Could be the recreation committee fund, or could be any other fund.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Any questions for Bo? All right.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Bo. That's great. Next item on the agenda is the BEAD grant, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, 64-page long update.
So Tom, our town planner, has done a little bit of work. Yep, the frequently asked questions document is 46 pages long. So he has arranged to have a presentation done on January 8th from someone who works with these grants. So just the update, we're going to know a lot more in about a month of the process.
So for the public's consumption, we are looking at applying for this grant that would provide, what's the name of the company?
Fidium Fiber, another option for internet in the town.
Speed it up a little bit. Any questions about that? What was the date for?
The next select board meeting, January 8th, 2024.
Great. Next item is the abatement account 913. Becky.
This is a second part. So back in August, you had to do a supplemental bill for a building that was assessed on the wrong property because they were closing. There was a second piece that needed to be done. Dawn has just processed the paperwork, and that was to fix the valuation now on the land because it wasn't developed land, but it had been assessed that way.
All right, so I have to read this then. Certificate of abatement, 36 MRSA. Funny little figure, 841, 2023. We, the undersigned assessors of the municipality of Pownell, Maine, hereby certify to Rebecca J. Taylor Chase, tax collector, that an abatement of property taxes has been granted as follows. Date granted December 11, 2023. Amount abated $45,000 value. Taxes 84825. Taxpayer Eric Started. Location map 6 lot 33/3A. Account number 913. Reason vacant lot assessed as developed. You are hereby discharged from any further obligation to collect the abated amount.
I will move that we move forward with the abatement.
Second.
And moving seconded to move forward with the abatement of map 6 lot 33/3A. For any further discussion? All in favor? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is volunteer for Bob Van Milligan on 891 Hollowell Road. To join the Conservation Commission.
Yes, he was here earlier too. I don't see him in the audience. We just had another recent resignation off the Conservation Commission too. So this would at least replace that person. Angela Kinghorn had to step back from the commission at this point in time. I have not got the oath ready. If you do approve this tonight, we'll get the oath ready later this week.
Andy, Bob Van Milligan.
I would move that we appoint Bob Van Milligan of 891 Hallowell Road to the Conservation Commission.
A second.
Moved and seconded to appoint Bob Van Milligan to the Conservation Commission. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Pass that down to Becky. Next item on the agenda is there any other new business? Is there any old business? Where are we with the generator up at the pumping station?
I am still waiting on the estimate from Irving for the tanks. And we are also looking to find out what agreement we have with Irving. So it means we wouldn't need to get 2 other estimates. So we're still in process with it.
Okay. No other old business? How about correspondence? Yes.
I had a couple residents in paying taxes and just commented on how nice the decorations inside and outside looked at Town Hall today. So that was nice to hear on a gloomy Monday morning.
Absolutely. And the incredible town tree. Thank you to the Hoag family. All right. Seeing nobody, I've had 14 phone calls, people yakking on my phone, which I'm going to list on the website from on.
Are you?
Yeah. Probably
Great idea.
for public information. None of them pleasant. I don't want to labor.
You want me to call you every day? And hi, John, how you doing?
Tell me. I move we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.